The city awakens with a restless pulse. The skyline stretches against the dawn, glass towers reflecting the golden hue of a world stirring to life. A distant siren wails, swallowed by the rhythm of honking cars and hurried footsteps. Pedestrians rush across crosswalks, lost in their own concerns, unaware of the quiet battles unfolding behind closed doors. Inside Central Precinct, the atmosphere is thick with urgency. The fluorescent lights cast a cold glow over the linoleum floors, where officers move with practiced efficiency. Phones ring. Paperwork shuffles. Conversations overlap, blending into a hum of authority and duty. The walls, lined with commendation plaques and department notices, bear silent witness to countless victories and failures. Through the din, one figure stands apart. Andre Randolph. Tall, poised, unshaken. His uniform is pressed to perfection, the gold insignia on his chest gleaming under the harsh lights. His eyes, steady and sharp, scan the precinct with the quiet assurance of a man who has seen everything yet reveals nothing. He moves with a confidence that isn't forced, an authority that needs no declaration. For years, he has worn this badge with pride. He has earned every stripe, every title, every ounce of respect that comes with his name. But today, none of that matters. Not yet. Today, he is just another black man walking into a room full of men who don't know him. And for some, that is all they will see. A moment stretches too long. A few curious glances flick his way. Some subtle, others not so much. It's not hostility, not outright, but it lingers in the air like an unspoken question. Who is he? Why is he here? Does he belong? Andre notices, but he gives nothing away. He has long learned that patience is its own kind of power. He steps forward, passing rows of desks cluttered with coffee-stained reports and half-eaten sandwiches. Officers weave around him, caught up in their own responsibilities. But one set of eyes stays locked on him, watching, assessing. From behind the front desk, Colt Booth leans back in his chair, arms crossed, a smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. He doesn't blink, doesn't greet, just stares as if waiting for Andre to explain himself, to prove something. Andre doesn't stop, doesn't hesitate. He approaches the desk, his presence commanding without a word. But he can already feel it in the air, the weight of assumption pressing in. This isn't going to be routine. This is going to be something much more. Wait. Did you catch that? This is about to get intense. If you've ever been underestimated, judged, or had to prove your worth when you shouldn't have to, then this story is for you. Hit that subscribe button right now because what's about to happen next? Oh, you won't believe it. Also, let me know in the comments, where are you watching from? Drop your city, state, or country below. Let's see how far this message spreads. The heavy glass doors of Central Precinct swing open as Andre Randolph steps inside, the heels of his polished black boots striking the tiled floor with quiet confidence. The air inside the station is thick with the scent of burnt coffee, printer ink, and the unmistakable musk of long hours and hardened authority. A wave of movement flows through the room, officers hunched over paperwork, detectives pacing with cell phones pressed to their ears, secretaries clacking away at keyboards, their fingers a blur of efficiency. Some officers glance up as he passes, a few nodding in acknowledgement, others letting their gazes linger just a second too long. Not out of familiarity, out of curiosity. Andre keeps walking. His uniform is crisp, his posture straight, his movements deliberate. The golden insignia on his chest catches the overhead lighting, reflecting a truth that some here have yet to recognize. At the front desk, Colt Booth watches him approach. Booth is a man who thrives on assumption. His graying hair is cropped close to his head, his uniform slightly wrinkled, the sleeves pushed up to his elbows. His smirk is the kind worn by men who believe they've seen everything, who think they can size someone up in an instant. And in this instant, he sizes up Andre Randolph and comes to the wrong conclusion. He leans back in his chair, crossing his arms over his chest, an amused glint in his eyes. Looks like someone's playing dress-up today, Booth says, his voice dripping with condescension. What are you lost? A few officers within earshot pause mid-conversation. A subtle shift ripples through the room. Andre tilts his head slightly, taking in the man before him. He has seen this look before. The smirk, the narrowed gaze, the way Booth's fingers drum idly on the desk, as if waiting for the punchline to a joke only he understands. But Andre doesn't joke. Not now. I'm here to conduct an internal review, he says smoothly, his voice even, measured. I'll need access to the case logs from last month. Booth lets out a short, sharp chuckle. A laugh meant to belittle. Review? Buddy, that's above your pay grade. Unless you got a supervisor hiding somewhere, I suggest you take a step back before you embarrass yourself. Andre doesn't blink. His fingers tap once, just once, against the desk. The tension in the room thickens. Across the precinct, Kaylee James, Jackson Murphy, and Bella Figueroa exchange glances. Kaylee leans closer to Jackson. Does he not know who that is? She whispers. Jackson shrugs, but his eyes remain locked on the scene unfolding before them. Andre slowly exhales through his nose. It would be so easy to correct Booth now, to wipe that smug look off his face with a single sentence. But easy isn't always effective. Instead, he lets the silence settle, lets it make Booth uncomfortable first. Then, finally, you seem awfully confident about what my pay grade is, Officer Booth. The smirk falters, just for a second. But Booth, unwilling to relinquish control, leans forward, propping his elbows on the desk. I've been in this department for over 20 years. I know every face that matters. And I ain't never seen you before. Andre studies him for a beat. Maybe you should start paying attention then. A sharp inhale from someone in the room. The remark lands harder than a punch. Booth stiffens slightly, then scoffs, shaking his head. You got some nerve, I'll give you that. He gestures lazily to a stack of files beside him. But I don't take orders from just anyone who waltzes in here flashing a badge. Andre nods, as if considering this. Fair enough. He reaches into his pocket and pulls out a laminated ID card, sliding it across the desk. Then let's make this real simple for you. Booth barely glances at it before shoving it back toward him. Nice try. I've seen fake credentials before. A sharp intake of breath from someone nearby. Kaylee James grips the edge of her desk. Jackson shakes his head slightly, muttering under his breath. Booth still doesn't realize. Andre gives him one last chance. You sure you don't want to read that carefully? Booth laughs, a hollow sound, shaking his head. Listen, guy, I don't know what game you're playing, but I'm not. The laugh dies in his throat. Because now, a shadow looms. Sergeant Spencer Vasquez steps up beside Andre, arms folded, his gaze sharp as steel. Behind him, Amari Hendricks and Oakland Booker, two more senior officers, come to a halt. The room shifts. A quiet realization spreads through the crowd. Booth looks up at Vasquez, sees the unreadable expression on his face, then looks back at the ID he so casually dismissed. Finally, he actually reads it. Lieutenant Andre Randolph, Internal Affairs Division. Silence. A weight drops in Booth's stomach, his face paling ever so slightly. His mouth opens, but nothing comes out. Andre, still calm, still composed, doesn't gloat. He simply waits. Lets Booth sit in the discomfort of his own mistake. The precinct is dead quiet now. And then, Andre speaks, voice as smooth as before. Something wrong, Officer Booth? Booth swallows, jaw tightening. A few beats of silence. Then Vasquez clears his throat, breaking the moment. Lieutenant Randolph, we've prepared the files you requested. Shall we proceed? The final nail in the coffin. Andre doesn't look at Booth as he takes back his ID. Yes, Sergeant. Let's. Booth sits there, frozen, as Andre turns away, untouched, unbothered, undeniable. He was never the one who needed to prove anything. And just like that, tables turned. Did you see how fast the smirk disappeared? 1 second, he thought he had all the power. The next, he was drowning in his own assumptions. Let's talk about it. Have you ever been underestimated like this? Tell me in the comments. And if you love seeing justice served in real time, hit that subscribe button right now. Because trust me, this story is just getting started. A tense silence lingers in the air, stretching across the precinct like a taut wire ready to snap. Colt Booth, despite the weight of his mistake creeping in, doesn't back down. His pride won't allow it. His ego won't surrender. Not yet. He exhales sharply, flipping through a file on his desk with exaggerated disinterest. The soft rustle of paper is the only sound filling the space. Listen, buddy, he mutters, his voice laced with forced amusement, like he's still in control. We get guys like you all the time. Think you can walk in here, flash a fake badge, and start barking orders. This isn't a game. His words cut through the room, but the impact isn't what he expects. Eyes dart around, some officers pretending not to listen, others watching with laser focus, waiting to see what happens next. Andre Randolph remains stone still, his face unreadable. But something shifts in his posture. It's subtle, but undeniable, a quiet tension that demands attention without a single word. His voice, when he speaks, is calm, but with an icy precision that pierces through the arrogance across the desk. You're making a lot of assumptions, Officer Booth. The way he says it, slow, deliberate, controlled, makes every word land like a warning. Across the room, Macy Fuller, a younger officer sitting at her desk, stiffens. She knows exactly who Andre is. And she knows Booth is digging himself into a hole so deep, he might never crawl out. Her fingers hover over her keyboard, but she can't focus anymore. She leans slightly toward Kaylee James, her voice a whisper laced with unease. Oh, no. He's making a mistake. Kaylee nods, barely blinking. She sees it too. But Colt Booth? He doesn't. He still doesn't. Instead, he leans back further in his chair, arms crossed like a man who thinks he's untouchable. There's a small scattering of snickers from nearby rookies. They're watching Booth, taking their cue from him. He's been here 20 years, after all. Surely, he knows what he's talking about. Right? Wrong. Booth lets out a low chuckle, shaking his head like he's dealing with someone who doesn't understand the rules. I'll tell you what, he says, dragging out the words as if he's doing a favor. I'm feeling generous today. Show me some actual credentials, and maybe I won't have to call security. The rookies chuckle again, their laughter thin and uncertain now, as if they're not quite sure if this is still a joke. Andre doesn't react. No anger. No frustration. Just silence. And then he moves. Slow. Controlled. Absolute. He reaches into his pocket and pulls out a leather badge case. Not rushed. Not dramatic. Just certain. Then, with precise intent, he places it on the desk. The gold shield inside is unmistakable. It catches the light. It carries weight. It demands respect. The room stills. A sharp beat of silence. Booth's smirk wavers. His gaze flickers to the badge, then back to Andre's face. It happens so fast, but the shift in Booth's expression is palpable. A flicker of doubt, of hesitation. A part of him knows now. He knows this isn't a game anymore. And yet, his pride refuses to break. He lets out another short laugh, but it's weaker this time. Forced. Yeah, sure. Nice try. He shoves the badge back toward Andre, barely looking at it. Macy Fuller gasps softly. A murmur spreads. A few officers exchange glances, some shifting uncomfortably in their chairs. Booth still doesn't realize. Andre watches him closely now, eyes unreadable. You sure you don't want to read that carefully? The words land like a cold warning. Booth hesitates. It's the smallest pause, but it's there. The weight in the room is changing. And then, a voice cuts through the tension like a blade. Randolph, we've been expecting you. The smirk on Booth's face drains instantly. His head snaps up, eyes wide, confusion flickering into something that looks dangerously close to fear. The voice belongs to Sergeant Spencer Vasquez. But Vasquez isn't alone. Beside him stand Amari Hendricks and Oakland Booker, two senior officers with years of authority behind them. And their expressions? Not amused. Not entertained. Not confused. They know exactly who Andre Randolph is. The realization hits Booth like a blow to the gut. The laughter in the room? Gone. The rookies who smirked along with him just moments ago? Now looking anywhere but at Booth. A heavy silence drapes over the room, thick and inescapable. Booth, for the first time in this entire encounter, looks genuinely uncertain. His fingers twitch on the desk. His mouth opens, then closes, like he's searching for something to say. But what can he say? The truth is staring him in the face. And everyone sees it. Andre remains composed, standing exactly as he was when he first walked in. Nothing has changed for him. But for Booth, everything has. And just like that, everything shattered. Imagine thinking you're the smartest in the room, only to realize you've been playing checkers while the other person is playing chess. That's exactly what just happened. Now let me ask you, have you ever witnessed someone get completely humbled like this? Drop your story in the comments. I want to hear it. And if you love watching arrogance crumble under the weight of truth, hit that subscribe button, because what happens next? Oh, it only gets worse for Booth. A charged silence grips the room. Sergeant Spencer Vasquez steps forward, his gaze steady as he extends his hand toward Andre Randolph. There's no hesitation, no uncertainty, just pure, unwavering respect. Andre accepts the handshake with measured ease, his grip firm. Apologies for the delay, Lieutenant Randolph, Vasquez says, his voice carrying across the room like a gavel striking wood. We've prepared the files you requested. Shall we proceed? The weight of those words slams into the room like a shockwave. Eyes dart. Jaws tighten. And then, Colt Booth stops breathing. His fingers clench around the edge of the desk. The title hangs in the air, ringing in his ears like a siren he never saw coming. Lieutenant? The color drains from Booth's face so fast it's almost unsettling. His smirk is gone. His confidence? Shattered. The file in his hand slips slightly, nearly falling before he catches it. But his grip is weak. His hands tremble. He forces himself to speak, but the words betray him. Lieutenant. The murmurs start instantly. Low whispers ripple through the precinct like a current of realization. A few officers exchange wide-eyed glances, disbelief etched onto their faces. Macy Fuller, Kaylee James, and Jackson Murphy? They don't even try to hide their reactions. Kaylee nudges Jackson with her elbow, eyes locked on Booth. Told you, she mutters. Jackson exhales slowly, shaking his head. This is bad. Macy, seated at her desk, simply closes her eyes for a moment, as if mentally saying a prayer for Booth's career. Because this is humiliation on a level no one recovers from easily. And standing at the center of it all? Andre Randolph. For the first time since he entered the precinct, a small smirk tugs at the corner of his lips. Not arrogant, not vengeful, just undeniable. He lets the silence stretch a second longer, just enough for the reality to fully sink in. Then, with the kind of composure that only comes from knowing exactly who you are, he delivers the final blow. That's right. His voice is measured, effortless, absolute. Lieutenant Randolph, Director of Internal Affairs. The words drop like a hammer. Colt Booth looks physically ill. His mouth opens, then closes, then opens again. There are no words. There is nothing he can say that will undo what just happened. The precinct is dead still, a room full of officers standing witness to Booth's public downfall. No one moves. No one speaks. Because everyone knows, this is career-ending. This is what happens when arrogance meets accountability. Colt's voice, when it finally comes, is weak, strained, desperate. Sir, I didn't realize. Andre's expression doesn't change. If anything, his smirk vanishes, replaced by something colder. Something collected, calculated, final. You didn't bother to check, Andre states, his tone firm, but not unkind. You saw me and made an assumption. Booth flinches. The truth cuts deeper than any reprimand ever could. But Andre isn't done. His eyes lock onto Booth's with a look that strips him bare. That's a dangerous habit, Officer Booth. One that might need reviewing. The entire room exhales. Because that was the death sentence. Booth stares, unable to speak. His mouth moves, but no sound escapes. He looks around, at the watchful eyes, the hushed conversations, the undeniable truth circling around him like vultures. And he knows. This moment will haunt him for the rest of his career. Because this wasn't just a mistake. This was a failure. And everyone saw it. That was brutal. And so satisfying. Imagine spending your whole life thinking you're the smartest in the room, only to realize you're the fool. That's exactly what Booth just experienced. The question is, have you ever witnessed a moment like this? Drop your stories in the comments. Let's talk about it. And if you live for moments where arrogance gets humbled, hit that subscribe button right now. Because trust me, this story isn't over. The precinct is quieter now. The evening shift has settled in, the once bustling office now humming at a slower rhythm. Most officers have either left for the night or are finishing up reports under the dim glow of desk lamps. The energy of the room has changed, less tense, more subdued. Colt Booth sits at his desk, hunched over, staring at nothing. His hands rest on an open file, but he hasn't turned a page in the last 15 minutes. His badge sits beside him, its golden shine mocking him. He's replaying everything. Every word. Every smirk. Every set of eyes that watched him crumble. Lieutenant Randolph, Director of Internal Affairs. Those words hit different now. His own voice echoes back in his mind, laced with arrogance, with certainty. Listen, buddy. We get guys like you all the time. Show me some actual credentials, and maybe I won't have to call security. The shame claws at his ribs. For years, he thought he knew everything. Thought experience made him untouchable. But today, he was the fool. He exhales, long and slow, as he grabs his duffel bag, slinging it over his shoulder. His body feels heavy, like he's carrying the weight of the entire precinct on his back. As he turns toward the exit, he catches movement out of the corner of his eye. Rudy Hartman. The older officer stands near the vending machines, arms folded across his chest. His uniform looks as worn as his face, years of late nights, hard lessons, and cases that never truly left him. Booth pauses. Rough day. Rudy asks, voice even. Booth lets out a short, bitter laugh. Rough here. Rudy doesn't move, doesn't say anything right away. Just watches him, his face unreadable. Booth finally exhales again, slower this time. I screwed up. Big time. It's the first honest thing he said all day. Rudy gives a small nod. Not in pity, not in agreement, just acknowledgement. Then he speaks. And his words slice deeper than Booth expects. We've all made mistakes, but not all of us learn from them. The air shifts. For a second, neither of them speak. Booth just stands there, his fingers tightening around the strap of his duffel bag. Because that's the real question, isn't it? Is he going to learn from this? Or is he just going to pretend it never happened? Booth doesn't answer. Because he doesn't know yet. Rudy gives him one last look before heading back to his desk. Booth stands there in the dimly lit precinct, the weight of his actions pressing down on him. And for the first time in a long time, he feels small. Reality just hit like a freight train. Booth spent his whole career thinking he had it all figured out. Now, he's staring at the mess he made. The question is, will he actually change? Or is this just another lesson that will be ignored? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And if you love seeing moments of reckoning like this, hit that subscribe button right now. Because this story still isn't over. The briefing room is packed. Officers fill every chair, some standing along the walls, their gazes fixed on the man at the front. Lieutenant Andre Randolph. He stands with his hands clasped before him, his uniform crisp, his presence undeniable. He doesn't pace. He doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't need to. Respect doesn't have to be demanded. When it's real, it's given. And today, this room is listening. Respect isn't about rank, power, or who speaks the loudest, Andre says, his voice steady and clear. It's about character. It's about treating people fairly. Whether you know their title or not, we are here to serve justice. That starts within these walls. The silence is palpable. There are no whispers, no fidgeting, just understanding sinking in. Even Colt Booth, standing at the back, listens. His arms aren't crossed anymore. His smirk is gone. He doesn't shuffle his feet, doesn't look away. He just listens. Because the truth is staring him in the face, and this time, he has no choice but to acknowledge it. Andre doesn't pause for applause. He doesn't need validation. His words carry their own weight. He steps down, his duty here done. As he moves through the crowd, officers make way for him, a quiet, unconscious sign of respect. And then he passes Booth. For a second, their eyes meet. Andre doesn't gloat. Booth doesn't beg. Just a nod. A silent acknowledgement of regret. And that's enough. Andre moves forward. He doesn't need an apology. His actions already spoke louder than words ever could. Let this sink in. If this story hit you deep, it's because you've seen it happen in real life. People judge first. Assume first. They think respect is something they control, something they decide to give based on who they think you are. But here's the truth. Respect isn't something you hand out like a gift. It's not given based on appearance, assumptions, or first impressions. Real respect? It's in how you treat people before you know who they are. Before you know their title, their influence, their power. Because by the time you find out, it's too late to take back the disrespect. Booth learned that the hard way. Will you? Now it's your turn. Have you ever been underestimated? Have you ever had to prove yourself when you shouldn't have had to? Drop your story in the comments. I want to hear it. And if you believe respect should be given, not earned based on bias, hit that subscribe button right now. Because trust me, this is just the beginning.